What's up everybody, and welcome to another edition of AGR'S Pop Culture Reviews. Now I've actually personally made the trek from one end of the coast to the other in this beautiful country of ours. And it kinda goes without saying, but given the vast distances, it's pretty much a mathematical certainty that you're eventually gonna have to stop and sleep. I actually slept in many of these kind of themed hotel lodges and inns that you find along the route, and they were pretty interesting to stay in. Many of them a throwback to the early 60s when families would take to the open road along Route 66. Now whenever I would stay in these hotels, I would always wonder about the history, things like who stayed in the room and some of the events that took place in them. Well, basically, this movie answers all those questions in a very brutal, tense, and macabre way. This is my official review of Bad Times at the El Royale. Let's take a closer look. Bad Times at the El Royale is a very interesting movie. While not a perfect movie, and certainly not one of my favorite movies of the year, it is a very unique film and I really enjoyed it. Now this movie's not going to appeal to mass audiences, but it is a really good film. Now let's get the obvious out of the way first, and I think to be fair to this movie review, we have to talk about this because this is most likely what this film is going to be compared to. Immediately when I started watching it, I felt like I was watching a watered down version of a Tarantino film. But I was quickly wrong as things drew out in this film, and it has its own unique style. Now it does have some of the same hallmarks, the witty banter between characters, the multiple perspectives of key events in the story, and most importantly, and I think this is probably the signature, it relies on actual music rather than a score in order to set the mood. Where this film diverges and has its very unique style is how it constantly tricks the audiences in making them feel a sense of ease in which you think you have the characters figured out, and then it completely turns the other way. I mean, this actually happened several times in the movie, and I thought that was pretty interesting. Some of them I didn't even see coming. They also did something very interesting in the film, and I don't think this has ever really been done, but they also take you from the perspective of a voyeur looking in at these kind of snapshots of an action that's going on in the film, and you again think that you've got things figured out, and then it turns out it's completely different. In this respect, it really amped up the tension a lot in this film, and towards the second half of the movie you feel like you're bracing yourself for something, and the payoff is pretty good. Now one of the other aspects of this film that make it really superb is the ensemble cast. Now, I've always said that when you don't have a clear standout in an ensemble cast, that means the synergy between all the cast members was done very well, and this is a perfect example of it. They did a really great job with these characters. Additionally, there's a lot of depth and complexity in each and every one of these characters. You're invested in them, you care about them, and their backstories are fascinating. From a technical aspect, they did something really important in that they gave them each their own time so that audiences wouldn't be confused, and yet somehow they were able to fuse these storylines together despite the fact that this is all just very circumstantial. Now, I'm not going to say much more than that, and I'm actually going to cut this review very short because I don't want to spoil anything. The reveals in this movie are fantastic. Though I do have to say, as I mentioned before, this is not a perfect film, and the third act of this movie grinds to a halt in exposition, and what I think was really bad is that you already know this, so they're just giving exposition for the sake of exposition. You already have figured all of this out, and the characters are rehashing this, and I think that was one of the fatal flaws at the end of this film. The other thing I found rather odd about this film is that they introduce a character a little bit later on in the film who turns out to be the main antagonist. Now, his backstory is told through the exposition of another character. It seemed a little bit contrived and out of place, and I have to admit, it just didn't fit right in the overall film. Also, it was a question about his motivation. If this character was as bad as he said he was, I don't think he would have been doing what he was doing. One of the things that I think troubled me the most is the fact that they just had this character spouting out lines and lines of dialogue for the sole purposes of saying, hey, this is the bad guy, which didn't work very well. Which is a real shame because I did like him as a character and he was portrayed very well. Now, despite a few questionable narrative choices, this is a really good film. It's very suspenseful, it's brutally honest in many ways, and I also love the interactions with the characters. Their entire stories are so interesting, even if they are told through the narrative of another character. But overall, I think this was a really great film and I highly recommend it. Definitely watch it in the movie theaters, it's worth the price of admission. Alright everybody, so that's my official review of Bad Times at the El Royale. As always, I thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next AGR's Pop Culture Reviews.